Commander Blake Mitchell's metallic fingers traced the edge of the holographic display, his crystalline eyes reflecting the impossible blue sphere rotating before him. The bridge of the Galactic Surveyor hummed with nervous energy as his crew processed what they were seeing. This wasn't just another routine planetary survey. This was witnessing something that shattered everything they thought they knew about intelligent life. "Run the scans again," Blake whispered, his voice barely audible over the ship's systems. Deep down, he knew the results would be the same. But hope dies hard when you're staring at the impossible. Lieutenant Sarah Wells, senior aide, manipulated the controls with trembling hands. Her biosuit's environmental readings spiked with stress hormones as she confirmed the nightmare scenario. 71% surface water coverage, sir. The dominant species has built massive settlements directly adjacent to these liquid death zones. Blake's breath caught in his throat. In 300 years of galactic exploration, they'd never encountered anything like this. The Galactic Confederation had mapped over 12,000 worlds, and not one intelligent species had ever voluntarily chosen to live near significant water bodies. It was universal law. Water meant death, sir. There's more, Wells continued, her voice cracking under the weight of what she was about to report. They don't just live near it, they go into it voluntarily. The bridge fell silent except for the rhythmic beeping of life support systems. Blake's mind raced through his extensive xenobiology training. The crystalline Vorthok had ancient legends about the great drowning entire armadas that vanished into oceanic graveyards. Their crystalline forms dissolved by the corrosive liquid. The silicon-based Drakmori wouldn't even approach star systems containing liquid water planets, believing them to be cursed by their death goddess. "Show me the behavioral patterns," Blake commanded, his authority mask slipping to reveal the raw fear beneath. The hologram shifted, displaying human settlements spanning continents. But what made Blake's blood run cold wasn't the size of their cities, it was their placement. These humans had deliberately built their greatest achievements right on the edges of vast water bodies. It was like watching someone construct their home on the lip of an active volcano. "They call it beachfront property," Wells reported, consulting her translation matrix. "It's considered desirable real estate." Blake's hands gripped the console so tightly his knuckles turned white. Across the galaxy, every intelligent species shared the same primal understanding: water worlds were forbidden zones. The gas giant dwellers spoke in hushed tones about the wet death. The desert evolved. Zephyrites had no words in their language for voluntary water contact that weren't synonymous with suicide. "This can't be natural selection," Blake muttered, his scientific mind struggling to process the data. No species survives by embracing their environment's most dangerous element. But wait, here's where it gets really crazy. Humans weren't just surviving near water. They were thriving because of it. Their agriculture depended on it. Their transportation systems utilized it. Their very bodies were composed of nearly 70% water. It was as if they'd evolved in partnership with the very thing that spelled doom for every other known intelligent species. Sir Wells interrupted his racing thoughts. The long-range sensors are detecting something else. They have recreational water activities. Blake's expression froze. Define recreational. They enter the water voluntarily, for pleasure. They have something called swimming and surfing, and... Wells paused, double-checking her readings. Something called deep-sea diving, where they deliberately descend to crushing depths. The commander's rage began building like a storm system. How dare these creatures mock the natural order? How dare they spit in the face of universal law? Every fiber of his being screamed that this was wrong, dangerous, an affront to everything rational. "Send the standard warning beacons immediately," Blake commanded, his voice sharp with urgency and barely controlled fury. "Mark the entire Sol system as a Class X death zone. These humans will learn the hard way what happens when you dance with death." But as his crew rushed to execute his orders, Blake found himself drawn back to the holographic display. Something nagged at him, a detail that didn't fit the pattern. He pulled up the human's technological development timeline and felt his world tilt on its axis. These water-loving maniacs hadn't just survived, they'd mastered interstellar travel. They developed technologies that rivaled anything in the Confederation. They'd built a civilization that should have been impossible according to every evolutionary model they'd ever studied. "Wells," he called out, his voice tight with a new emotion he couldn't quite name. "Show me their spacefaring capabilities." The hologram shifted to display sleek vessels emerging from the blue world's atmosphere, ships that moved with a fluid grace that reminded him uncomfortably of the very element he feared most. Their hulls were designed with curves and flows that seemed to mimic water's movement through space. "They call their space program NASA," Wells reported. "It stands for National Aeronautics and Space Administration. But sir, their ship designs, they're based on aquatic principles." Blake's hands began shaking as the implications hit him. These humans hadn't just conquered their fear of water, they'd weaponized it. They'd turned humanity's greatest weakness into their greatest strength. While every other species in the galaxy fled from water worlds, these creatures had learned to harness the very forces that terrified everyone else. "Run a probability analysis," he ordered through gritted teeth. "Many unexplored systems contain significant water worlds." The answer that came back made his blood freeze. "Approximately 47% of uncharted systems show spectral signatures consistent with liquid water presence." "Sir." Blake stared at the rotating blue marble, realizing with growing horror that they'd just discovered a species that could claim nearly half the galaxy's unexplored real estate. Worlds that the Confederation had written off as uninhabitable death traps were potential colonies for these water-obsessed humans. Sir, Wells said quietly, "We're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld." Blake's rage boiled over like a volcanic eruption. "Impossible," he snarled, his voice echoing through the bridge. "Nothing intelligent chooses the deep." But even as he spoke those words, he knew they were about to become obsolete. The humans had just rewritten the rules of survival, and the galaxy would never be the same. The blue world continued its rotation, serene and deadly, while somewhere in its crushing depths, a species that should never have existed was preparing to emerge from the abyss and claim the stars. And that's when Blake realized they weren't just witnessing first contact. They were witnessing the birth of a new galactic superpower. Speaking of power, just like compound interest builds wealth, over time, the humans' mastery of water had compounded into galactic dominance. Check out our next video on the incredible power of compounding and how small advantages can lead to massive results. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Confederation first discovered Earth, and now the tables were about to turn in the most spectacular way imaginable. Captain Jake Thompson stood on the bridge of the Deep Explorer, watching the alien fleet through the view screen with the calm confidence of an apex predator studying its prey. His ship cut through space like a shark through water, every line of its hull designed with the fluid dynamics that had made humanity master of the seas. "Distance to the border, Tom?" Jake asked his navigator, Tom Bradley, whose fingers danced across the holographic controls with practiced ease. 200,000 kilometers and closing fast, Captain," Tom replied, his voice carrying that special kind of excitement that comes right before you make history. "And sir, you need to see this formation they're holding." Jake's eyes narrowed as he studied the alien fleet's positioning. 27 vessels arranged in what could only be described as a defensive panic formation. They were maintaining maximum distance from each other, avoiding even the slightest overlap of their energy fields. More telling was how they'd positioned themselves, completely avoiding the asteroid. Fields' ice formations that sparkled like frozen tears in the void. "They're terrified," Tom observed, his voice building with excitement as the implications became clear. "Look at their formation. They're treating our ship like it's death incarnate, like we're carrying the plague itself." Jake's smile was absolutely predatory. For 3 months, Earth's best xenobiologists had been studying every scrap of data they could gather about the Galactic Confederation. The pattern was so obvious once you knew what to look for, it was almost embarrassing. Every single habitable world the aliens had claimed was bone dry. Desert planets, volcanic worlds, rocky moons with barely enough moisture to sustain a cactus. Their cities were built in the most arid regions possible, as far from any water source as they could manage. It's like they're allergic to H2O, Tom muttered, pulling up the territorial maps on his secondary display. Every single colony world shows the same pattern, maximum distance from any liquid water source. The puzzle pieces were falling into place with satisfying clicks, and Jake felt the thrill of the hunt coursing through his veins. This wasn't just first contact. This was the moment humanity discovered they held the ultimate trump card in galactic politics. While every other species in the galaxy fled from water like vampires from sunlight, humans had spent millennia learning to harness its power. You know what this means, don't you? Jake asked, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more authority than a shout. We're not just another species asking for membership in their little club. We're the one thing in the universe they're absolutely terrified of. Tom's grin was infectious. We're the monsters under their bed. Open a channel, Jake ordered, his voice now dripping with calculated menace. Let's see how they react to our greeting. Tom. Make sure we're broadcasting on all frequencies. I want every ship in that fleet to hear this. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying the bridge of the alien flagship. Commander Blake Mitchell appeared on screen, his crystalline features already showing signs of stress. The universal translator was working overtime. But Jake could see the exact moment when his words registered with the alien commander. Greetings, Commander Mitchell, Jake began, his voice carrying the weight of Earth's vast oceans. We come from the blue world. We are children of the crushing depths. But here's where it gets really interesting. Jake wasn't just making idle threats. He was stating biological fact. Humans had evolved from the primordial soup of ancient seas. Their bodies were 70% water. Their planet was a water world that would give any sensible alien species nightmares. And most importantly, they'd learned to thrive in environments that would kill these crystal-based life forms in seconds. Blake's response was immediate and visceral. His species' equivalent of screaming filled the communication. Chinola sound like breaking glass, mixed with the dying wail of a winter wind. The translator couldn't even process it properly, just outputting random static and error codes. Did we just break their commander? Tom asked, barely containing his laughter. The alien's reaction was even more dramatic than Jake had hoped. Within seconds, the communication channel cut abruptly, leaving only dead air and the soft hum of the deep explorer systems. Jake watched, with growing satisfaction as the alien fleet's formation began to dissolve into chaos. Sir, Tom reported, his voice tight with excitement, they're powering up their hyperspace drives. All of them. Jake nodded, unsurprised. Of course they are. I just told them we're literally made of their worst nightmare. Within minutes, the entire alien fleet had jumped to hyperspace in what could only be described as panicked retreat. One moment, 27 warships were arrayed in defensive formation. The next, they were gone, leaving only automated warning buoys behind like breadcrumbs marking their flight path. Jake chuckled darkly, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a poker player who just revealed a royal flush that was easier than drowning a cat. But the victory was more than just symbolic. Jake knew they'd just witnessed the birth of a new balance of power in the galaxy. The Galactic Confederation, for all their advanced technology and territorial claims, had just revealed their ultimate weakness. They were afraid of something humans considered as natural as breathing. Tom, start plotting courses to every system they've marked as uninhabitable, Jake ordered, his mind already racing ahead to the implications. Cross-reference. With our Waterworld databases? Already on it, Captain, Tom replied, his fingers flying over the controls. And sir, the preliminary results are... incredible. The data that came back was staggering. Thousands of worlds marked as Class X death zones by the Confederation. Planets with vast oceans, extensive river systems, polar ice caps. Humans could not only survive on, but thrive on. Real estate that the aliens had written off as uninhabitable. Death traps were potential paradise colonies for water-adapted humans. We're not just talking about a few new worlds, Jake realized, his voice filled with awe. We're talking about claiming nearly half the galaxy's unexplored real estate. Tom's excitement was palpable. Captain, according to these readings, the Confederation has avoided entire sectors because of water world concentrations. We could establish colonies on worlds they won't even survey. Jake stood up from his command chair, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. Set course for Earth. We need to report this to High Command immediately, Sir Tom said quietly. We've just rewritten the rules of galactic politics, haven't we? Jake's smile was sharp as a shark's tooth. Tom, we haven't just rewritten the rules. We've discovered that we're playing a completely different game than everyone else in the galaxy. As the Deep Explorer turned toward home, Jake couldn't help but think about the profound implications of what they'd just learned. The aliens' fear of water wasn't just cultural, it was biological, instinctual, hardwired into their very DNA, and humanity had just announced themselves as the living embodiment of that. Fear, the galaxy was about to get a lot more interesting. Just like compound interest builds wealth over time through the power of consistent growth, humanity's mastery of water was about to compound into galactic dominance. Check out our next video on the incredible power of compounding, and how small advantages can lead to massive results over time. The emergency klaxons hadn't stopped wailing in the Galactic Council chambers for 3 straight hours. Representatives from 47 species had been summoned with unprecedented urgency, their various forms of transportation converging on the neutral station, like moths drawn to a flame that might just burn them all. The massive circular chamber, designed to accommodate the galaxy's most diverse life forms, never hosted a gathering this desperate or this terrified. At the center of the chamber, holographic Earth rotated slowly with hypnotic menace. Its blue surface caught the light from dozens of different visual spectrums, causing visible distress among the assembled delegates. Some species had to wear special protective filters just to look at it. Others had dimmed their optical sensors too, the point where they could barely see anything else. Order. The council speaker's voice crackled through the translation matrix, but you could hear the panic even through the electronic filtering. We will address the Terran menace with the gravity it deserves. Elder Vorthok, of the crystalline civilization, rose from his designated platform, his normally pristine form trembling with what could only be described as ancestral terror. His species had evolved on worlds where water was so rare it was considered a myth, yet here he was, confronting the living embodiment of their deepest nightmares. Honored delegates, his voice resonated through the chamber like breaking glass. It's not just the water. It's what water represents in the deepest recesses of our genetic memory. The unknown depths, the crushing pressure that can shatter our crystalline forms. The ancient things that lurk beneath, waiting to drag us down into eternal darkness. The ethereal collective's representative flickered with barely controlled fury, her energy form pulsing with dangerous instability. Our racial memories scream of the Great Submersion. They transmitted directly into the minds of every delegate present. When our homeworld's ice caps melted and swallowed continents whole, cities that had stood for millennia disappeared beneath the waves in a single day. Only those who fled to the void survived the drowning. But wait, here's where it gets really disturbing. As species after species began sharing their tales of aquatic horror, a pattern emerged that chilled every delegate to their core. The Windriders spoke of tsunamis that ended their first civilization in a single, terrible day, walls of water moving faster than their fastest atmospheric vehicles, machine builders, their metallic forms literally rusting at the edges. From stress-induced oxidation spoke of their ancient enemy, corrosion, born from water's corrupting touch. Water dissolved our greatest achievements, the machine builder delegate reported. His voice modulated through speakers that crackled with static. Our cities, our monuments, our very Badazal, reduced to rust and decay by this universal solvent. The gas giant dwellers shared holographic records of their ancestors' attempts to explore water worlds. The footage was horrifying. Exploration fleets disappearing into oceanic depths, their final transmissions cutting off as the crushing pressure imploded their vessels like tin cans. The pressure at those depths, the gas giant delegate explained, his form shimmering with remembered trauma. It's beyond anything we evolved to handle. Our people describe it as being embraced by death itself, species after species revealed. The same universal truth water was the great destroyer, the cosmic force that had shaped their evolution through fear and avoidance. The desert-evolved Zephyrite had no words in their language for voluntary water contact that weren't synonymous with suicide. The silicon-based Drakmori believed water worlds were cursed by their death goddess, forbidden zones where the living went to die. But the humans, whispered the hive mind representative, their collective voice thick with fear and rage, they swim in it like demons. They drink it, they were born from it. The chamber fell into terrified silence that was so complete you could hear the station's life support system cycling. Every delegate was processing the same, impossible reality, somewhere in the galaxy. Species had evolved that not only tolerated their universal phobia, but actively embraced it. Show them the recreational footage, Elder Vorthok commanded, his voice cracking with disbelief. The holographic display shifted to show humans engaged in what they called water sports. Delegates recoiled in horror as they watched humans deliberately throwing themselves into water from great heights, riding waves that would crush most known life forms and most terrifying of all, descending voluntarily into the crushing depths armed with nothing but primitive breathing apparatus. They call it fun, the council speaker announced, the word struggling to translate across species barriers because most languages had no equivalent concept for voluntarily embracing death. The ethereal collective's representative pulsed with dangerous energy. They've militarized our greatest fear. Look at their space vessels. They're designed with the same principles they use to navigate underwater. Streamlined, pressure-resistant, capable of operating in environments that would kill us instantly. This isn't just biological adaptations. Realize the quantum consciousness delegate, their thoughts rippling through the chamber like waves. This is psychological warfare on a species level. They've conquered the one thing that every civilization in the galaxy fears most. The machine builder delegate's form sparked with electrical discharge. Our analysis indicates they don't just tolerate water, they require it. Their bodies are composed of nearly 70% water. They're literally living extensions of our worst nightmare. But here's the truly terrifying part. The humans weren't just surviving with water, we're thriving because of it. Their agriculture was based on water cycles. Their energy systems harnessed water's power. Their entire civilization was built around mastering the very element that's driven every other species to the driest corners of the galaxy. They've turned our weakness into their strength. The Windrider delegate observed, his atmospheric form rippling with agitation. While we fled from water worlds, they were learning to harness them. They'd have had thousands of years to perfect techniques we never even attempted. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Confederation had spent millennia mapping the galaxy, marking water worlds as uninhabitable death zones, Class X systems to be avoided at all costs, entire sectors written off as too dangerous for exploration. And now they discovered that these forbidden zones were potential paradise colonies for a species that had learned to love what everyone else feared. How many systems have we marked as uninhabitable due to water presence? Elder Vorthok asked. Though his voice suggested he already knew the answer would be devastating, 47% of uncharted space, came the reply that sent shockwaves through the chamber. Nearly half the galaxy's unexplored real estate. The realization hit every delegate simultaneously. They weren't just dealing with a new species. They were confronting a civilization that could claim territories they'd never even considered colonizing. The humans had effectively doubled the habitable galaxy overnight. Not through conquest, but through their complete lack of aquatic fear. We've encountered the impossible, the hive mind whispered. Their collective consciousness struggling to process the reality. Species that has conquered their deepest, most primal fear, and is now reaching for the stars with wet grasping fingers. As the chamber erupted in panicked discussions and emergency protocols, one thing became crystal clear. The balance of galactic power had just shifted forever. The humans hadn't just arrived on the scene. They'd revealed that they'd been preparing for galactic dominance while everyone else had been running from puddles, just like compound interest builds wealth over time through consistent growth. Humanity's mastery of their fears had compounded into an unstoppable advantage. Check out our next video on the incredible power of compounding and how facing your fears can lead to extraordinary results. The hyperspace exit flash lit up the void like a supernova as Admiral Ryan Davis emerged from the quantum tunnel aboard the Tsunami. His flagship cutting through space with the fluid grace of a great white shark, sensing blood in the water. Behind him, Earth's entire expeditionary fleet materialized in perfect formation. 37 vessels spread across the void like an approaching storm system, each one bearing names that would have sent shivers down alien spines if they'd understood the significance. The Leviathan, Kraken, Tempest, Maelstrom, each name a testament to humanity's mastery over the very forces that had terrorized galactic civilization for millennia. Distance to the Confederation capital, Lieutenant Martinez? Ryan asked. His navigation officer, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd spent decades commanding vessels through Earth's most treacherous waters. 50,000 kilometers in closing, Admiral, came the crisp reply. And sir, you need to see the defensive formation they're attempting. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. The Confederation's home fleet was arrayed in what could only be described as a panic formation, ships scattered across a massive defensive perimeter, each vessel maintaining maximum distance from the others. But what really caught his attention was their positioning relative to the system's ice-rich asteroid belt. They were avoiding it entirely, treating those frozen water sources like radioactive hazards. Sir, his communications officer, Commander Lisa Parker, reported with barely contained excitement, "We're receiving multiple transmissions from their fleet. They're requesting terms for unconditional surrender." Ryan's smile was cold as the ocean depths, carrying the weight of every hurricane humanity had ever weathered. Patch them through. Let's hear what they have to say. The main view screen filled with a cacophony of alien voices, each species translator working overtime to convert their panic into something resembling coherent communication. Ryan listened with growing satisfaction as surrender requests poured in from across the enemy fleet. "We yield to the water demons," came one transmission from a crystalline ship. "Please, we offer no resistance to your aquatic supremacy. Our weapons are powered down," another voice pleaded. "We acknowledge your dominion over the liquid death." But here's where it gets really interesting. This wasn't just military superiority. This was psychological warfare on a scale that had never been seen in galactic history. Ryan had realized something that the Confederation's war planners had missed entirely. You can't fight an enemy that embodies your deepest, most primal fear. It's like asking someone with arachnophobia to wrestle a giant spider with their bare hands. "Patch me through to their leadership," Ryan commanded, his voice carrying the weight of tsunamis that had reshaped coastlines and the authority of someone who'd learned to harness nature's most destructive forces. The Confederation's High Council appeared on screen, their various forms trembling with an emotion Ryan had learned to weaponize over the past 6 months. Hydrophobia so deep it was encoded in their very DNA. Commander Blake Mitchell, the crystalline officer who'd first encountered Earth, looked like he'd aged decades in the span of months. Admiral Davis, Blake's voice cracked through the translation matrix. We request terms." Ryan studied the defeated alien commander with the same calculating gaze he'd once used to read storm patterns in the North Atlantic. "Terms," he repeated, letting the word hang in the air like the calm before a hurricane. "I think you misunderstand the situation, Commander. We offer alliance," Ryan began, his tone deceptively calm, like the surface of a deep ocean hiding crushing depths beneath. "Your species fear the deep. We have mastered it completely. Together, we can claim the galaxy's forbidden worlds. The water worlds you've always avoided like the plague." The silence that followed was profound. Ryan could see the alien council members processing what he'd just offered. It wasn't conquest in the traditional sense. It was something far more sophisticated. He was offering them partnership in claiming territories they'd never even dreamed of accessing. "The blue worlds," Blake whispered, his voice barely audible. "Through the communication system, there are thousands of them, unclaimed, uninhabited. We never even dared to survey them." "Exactly." Ryan's smile turned predatory, carrying the confidence of someone who'd just realized they'd held all the cards in a game. The other players didn't even know they were playing. And now you know why humans aren't afraid of the dark. been living in it, swimming through it, 3/4 of our planet covered in midnight depths for our entire existence. The implications hit the alien council like a tidal wave. They'd spent millennia mapping the galaxy, marking entire sectors as uninhabitable death zones because of water presence. Thousands of worlds with vast oceans, extensive river systems, polar ice capsule written off as too dangerous for exploration. And now they were facing a species that considered those same worlds prime real estate. Your species evolved to fear water because it represented death. Ryan continued, his voice taking on the rhythm of waves against a shore. Ours evolved to embrace it because it represented life. While you built your cities in the driest corners of worlds, we built ours on coastlines and river deltas. Commander Parker stepped forward, her tablet displaying colonization projections. Admiral, should I show them the expansion possibilities? By all means, Ryan nodded, gesturing to the main screen. The display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with thousands of water worlds highlighted in blue. The sheer scale was staggering. Nearly half of all potentially habitable planets fell into categories the Confederation had marked as uninhabitable. You're looking at the future of human expansion, Ryan explained, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. Every blue dot represents a world we can colonize, terraform, or harvest for resources. Worlds you've been avoiding for your entire civilization's existence. Blake's form seemed to shrink as the reality hit him. We handed you half the galaxy without even knowing it. You didn't hand us anything? Ryan corrected, his voice sharp with authority. You abandoned it. There's a difference. But here's the truly brilliant part of Ryan's strategy. He wasn't just offering military alliance. He was offering economic partnership. The Confederation had advanced technologies that humans needed. Faster than light travel, energy weapons, planetary engineering capabilities. In exchange, humans could provide access to resource-rich worlds that the aliens couldn't even approach. Think about it, Ryan continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. Your species has been playing galactic chess with half the board removed. We're offering to give you access to the other half. The alien council members were exchanging rapid communications in their native languages, their translation systems struggling to keep up with the flood of excited chatter. Ryan could see the moment when the fear began transforming into something else: opportunity. What would you require from us? Blake asked, his voice steadying as he began to see the possibilities. Partnership, Ryan replied simply. Your technology, our territories, your manufacturing capabilities, our resource extraction, your knowledge of galactic politics, our expansion into unexplored sectors. The offer hung in the void like a lifeline thrown to drowning sailors. The Confederation could continue to rule the dry worlds they'd always preferred, while gaining access to the water worlds they'd always feared. It was elegant in its simplicity, a win-win scenario that transformed humanity from a threat into an asset. We accept, Blake said finally, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. Ryan's smile was triumphant as he watched the alien fleet begin to stand down. In 6 months, humanity had gone from unknown species to galactic power broker. They'd turned their greatest difference into their greatest advantage, proving that sometimes the thing that makes you different is exactly what makes you unstoppable. Just like compound interest builds wealth over time through consistent growth, humanity's unique advantages had compounded into galactic dominance. Check out our next video on the incredible power of compounding, how your unique strengths can lead to extraordinary results. 1 year later, the impossible had become routine. The massive exploration vessel Kraken cut through the void toward Kepler-4 to be a world that had been marked as an uninhabitable death zone for 3 centuries. Its hull gleamed with bioluminescent patterns that Dr. Lisa Parker had painstakingly designed to communicate with potential deep-sea life patterns that pulsed and flowed like the heartbeat of some ancient ocean deity. Final approach to Kepler-4 for 2B, announced Captain Mike Rogers, his voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who'd spent the last year rewriting the rules of galactic exploration. All stations report ready for orbital insertion. Dr. Lisa Parker stood at the observation deck, her eyes fixed on the blue marble growing larger in the view screen. After months of planning, they were finally here, the first joint human-alien expedition to a water world. The significance wasn't lost on her. 3 centuries ago, the Galactic Confederation had marked this planet as too dangerous for any form of life. Today, they were about to make it humanity's newest colony. "Atmospheric composition is perfect," she reported to the mixed crew, her voice electric with excitement that was infectious even to the alien crew members. "Ocean depth averages 4 kilometers deeper than Earth's Mariana Trench. The pressure readings are absolutely incredible." The alien crew members volunteers who had undergone intensive therapy to overcome their crippling hydrophobia watched in amazement and terror as the human teams prepared for the first dive with eager anticipation. Commander Blake Mitchell, the crystalline officer who'd first encountered Earth, stood rigid beside the preparation bay, his form still reflecting deep anxiety despite months of psychological conditioning. "You're absolutely certain about this?" Blake asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone watching his worst nightmares become reality. "The pressure at those depths could crush our finest vessels like paper." Lisa sealed her helmet and grinned. With predatory confidence, her eyes gleaming with the same intensity that had driven human explorers to the deepest trenches of Earth's oceans. "Commander, my species learned to swim before we learned to walk. We've been exploring underwater caves for 50,000 years. This is just a bigger, deadlier pool." But here's where it gets really amazing. Lisa wasn't just being cocky. She was stating biological fact. Human babies are born with a diving reflex that slows their heart rate underwater. Human lungs can adapt to pressure changes that would kill most other species. Human eyes can adjust to the darkness of the deep, where alien optical systems fail completely. "Launch sequence initiated," announced the dive coordinator, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. "The Cousteau is ready for deployment." Submersible Cousteau was a marvel of human engineering, designed specifically for deep water exploration on alien worlds. Its hull was crafted from the same materials used in Earth's deepest diving vessels, but enhanced with alien technology that allowed it to withstand pressures that would crush conventional submarines as the submersible descended into the alien ocean. Lisa felt the familiar thrill of discovery that had driven human explorers for millennia. The water around them was a deep blue-green that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. Schools of alien fish Fu could call them, that moved in patterns that defied Earth biology. Their bodies generating light shows that would have made the aurora borealis jealous. "Depth, 200 meters and descending," reported the pilot, Commander Jack Thompson. "Pressure is holding steady. Hull integrity at 100%. Lisa pressed her face to the viewing port, watching as they passed through layers of bioluminescent creatures that looked like living jewels suspended in liquid space. Coral formations, or something that served the same function, spread across the ocean floor in patterns that seemed almost deliberately artistic. "This is incredible," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "The biodiversity here is off the charts. We're seeing species that evolved in complete isolation for millions of years." The alien crew members, watching through remote cameras, were experiencing something unprecedented. They were seeing a water world, not as a place of death, but as a place of incredible beauty and possibility. For the first time in their species' history, they were looking at an ocean and seeing life instead of terror. "Depth, 4,000 meters, Jack reported. "We're approaching the deepest parts of the ocean." "Lisa, are you seeing this?" Lisa's breath caught in her throat. Spread across the ocean floor was a massive underwater canyon system, its walls covered in formations that looked almost like cities. Bioluminescent creatures moved through the structures in patterns that suggested intelligence, purpose, maybe, even civilization. "Jack, take us closer," she ordered, her scientific curiosity overriding every safety protocol. "I need to document this." As they approached the formations, Lisa made a note in her log with fierce pride. The galaxy feared the deep because they never learned to love it. They saw endless void where we saw endless possibility. Today we don't just claim a new world, we claim dominion over fear itself. But that wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. As the Cousteau continued its exploration, Lisa began to understand the true scope of what they were accomplishing. This wasn't just about claiming new territory. This was about transforming the very concept of what it meant to be alive in the universe. The universe isn't divided between land and space, she continued in her log, her voice carrying the weight of someone who just made a world-changing discovery. It's divided between those who fear the unknown depths and those who dive into them with open arms. 12 hours later, as the Custo surfaced from its historic dive, Lisa could see the lights of New Atlantis beginning to glow in the deep waters below. Humanity's first underwater city on an alien world was taking shape. It's bioluminescent. Towers rising from the ocean floor like a beacon of conquest, calling to all species brave enough to follow humanity into the abyss. The construction crews, a mix of human deep-sea specialists and alien engineers who'd overcome their hydrophobia, were working around the clock to build something unprecedented. An underwater city that would serve as headquarters for humanity's expansion into the water worlds. Status report on New Atlantis, Lisa requested from the Surface Control Center. Phase 1 construction is ahead of schedule, reported the project. Manager, Dr. Tom Bradley, will have full life support operational within the week. The alien engineering teams are adapting faster than we expected. Blake approached Lisa as she reviewed the construction reports, his crystalline form no longer trembling with fear. Dr. Parker, I owe you an apology. When we first encountered your species, we saw you as a threat to everything we understood. About the universe? Lisa looked up from her reports, surprised by the admission. And now? Now I see you as the key to unlocking half the galaxy we never even knew existed, Blake replied, his voice carrying a tone of respect that hadn't been there before. The water worlds were never forbidden. They were just waiting for someone brave enough to claim them. As the lights of New Atlantis grew brighter in the depths below, Lisa realized they'd accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They'd transformed an entire civilization's greatest fear into their greatest opportunity. The water worlds were no longer forbidden zones of death. They were humanity's empire and the gateway to a future where the galaxy's greatest treasures lay hidden in its deepest depths. The age of terrestrial dominance was over. The age of aquatic empire had begun. Just like compound interest builds wealth over time through consistent growth and patience, humanity's courage to face the unknown depths had compounded into galactic dominance. Check out our next video on the incredible power of compounding and how facing your fears can lead to extraordinary results. The end.